everyone.
We can't have.
Just after 2 o'clock, so we'll probably go get started. We have a few people online, about 16. I think some of those are AI note takers, which Tim and I were just talking about. We need to get put up for ourselves someday. But we have a few people here online, so I guess you probably don't need to do quick introductions at this point because the group's pretty familiar with themselves, with everybody. So I guess we'll just get right into it. So the first thing we have on the agenda for today is PM1 safety measures. So Jim, if you want to grab that, and I can flip your slides for you.
All right, great. Thanks everybody for coming today. I appreciate it. Just as a little background for those of you that have joined our safety committee meeting during the process of setting up our Safe Streets and Roads for All. We originally started the safety committee really to give feedback and regional context on our safety planning. The federal government during the previous transportation bill, which was called MAP 21, set a requirement for state departments of transportation to set targets on a range of things, safety being one of them, and we call them PM1 just to classify them, and gave MPOs or metropolitan planning organizations, which MAP is, the opportunity to set our own targets to be able to recognize really the different safety nature that we have and our ability to hopefully provide a little bit more support to our jurisdictions as they look to take on safety projects and just improve traffic safety generally. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, happy to go with any questions. And I think really for the sake of making sure folks are following along that haven't seen it before, I'll let Lindsay capture questions in the room, and I guess please just stop me if we need to. I'll start off with, first of all, the measures are a 5-year rolling average. So you'll see things with decimal points. We round it to the 10th place. And that is just a function, recognizing that the number of fatalities or number of serious injuries does vary year over year. That just gives us a bit more of a stable measure to look at. And while that's good and standard practice for setting targets and tracking things, it's not where we are now. So you'll see in bold here on this first slide, we're over the last 2 or 3 years, we've really looked to see where we can change these and make them match what our goal is now, which is to get to 0 fatalities and serious injuries by 2040. So I'll show you how we went about that. And again, any questions you have, please let us know. We've set these targets using baseline crash data from 2019 through 2023. And when we talk about fatal or serious injury crash rates, fatal and serious injury rates, we're using that by how much volume is on those roadways where these crashes are occurring within our region, and that's measured at 100 million per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. We'll go to the next slide, please, Lindsay. So this is where we are. The graphs will remain similar throughout. So to describe the structure, the solid blue bars are the things that are measured. So in this instance, these are our projected number of fatalities in the region through 2040. And again, you'll see with our goal by 2040 of having 0. The teal color, or kind of that solid line that changes over time, that's that 5-year rolling average. And again, that's the measure that we've established for ourselves. And the red line there that's semi-transparent, that is, in this case, it's a polynomial function fitted to that curve to give us something to track year over year that ideally gets to this point. So we know over time that these actual fatalities that we're measuring won't fit this curve, and we'll have to readjust. But for the purpose of the target setting that we've done over the last couple of years, it's given us a good baseline, and I think it's representative of where we are now. You will note that for a period of time, that red line is above the teal line. And so when we set our targets, they artificially raised over those 2-year periods, and that was just to get us to that baseline. So at the end, I'm going to report and I'm going to say that we're doing really well. The exception being, or that understanding, that we did set our targets actually semi-artificially high just to get ourselves on that curve to measure performance. Are there any questions on kind of this construct of the graph and how we're going to be talking about this going forward? Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide then, please. So this is what MAPPA has been tracking over time. We started that baseline back in 2006, and you can see the variability that we've seen in fatalities year over year. 2015 in particular, unfortunately, was not a good year for our region and for the nation in fatalities. We had an artificial spike, I would say, and then we showed some progress generally with crashes creeping up, or those fatalities from crashes creeping up over the last 3 years. One addition, or two additions, I guess, to this chart that I didn't describe previously, that transparent green block there, that shows the 5-year rolling average period that we evaluated to set our targets. And then the asterisk and the star there are when we set targets, we set the upcoming year. So in this case, 2024. It is the projected, and then the target itself is that projection and that target that we've set for 2025. Sorry, I'm looking from a single monitor here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So you can see over time, basically, we showed that prior to 2023, our targets were being set by that a straight line fit to the 5-year rolling average, and that's in this case what's shown in that red line. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, going forward, we're going to take into consideration, we'll look at that 5-year rolling average slope, and that'll help us come up with our, an assessment of how well we're performing, but the target itself is being set from that curve to 0. Any questions on the fatalities performance measures and targets for this year?
Hey, Jim. It's been a while. It's been a while. How long before you know the actuals in 24? Does that take a census time, or when you get your update on your data?
Yeah, I'd say that's a really good question. I'll start out, and I think I saw that Don had come into the room. So that's dependent upon the availability of crash data from the Departments of Transportation. The Iowa DOT is generally available, within a number of days. And we do acknowledge that serious injuries, there's a 180-day period. I think I'm saying that. If it's not 6 months, Don, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a period of time before that final assignment is given to a serious injury. And Nebraska Department of Transportation is working really hard, shifting to a new data collection methodology and database system, which I know has, for the past couple of years, had it take a little bit longer than we'd want. But I'll turn it over to Don and let him give an estimate for 2024.
I can speak on that. Generally, it's 3 to 6 months before it's ready. Where we may have the severity known, but there's other pieces of information that we're cleaning up, like location, lat longs. And so we can provide a preliminary count for that information fairly early. We have to wait 30 days for fatalities, because if someone passed away more than 30 days, within 30 days after a crash, it's still counted, kind of updated, amended later. But we generally process within 60 to 90 days. And then we do cleanup, so 3 to 6 months is what's going to be available.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate that, and thanks for the question, Pat. And I think that's important. Those are one of the things that we're working really hard on with our Safe Streets planning. Generally, is just an understanding of how we're going to communicate outcomes year over year, and being able to understand and appreciate and to take into consideration those recent crashes that are going to be foremost in the mind of the public and decision makers is important. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, we'll go on to the next slide, please, Lindsay. So I had mentioned previously that the crash rate is based upon regional traffic volume. So this is a projection. MAPPA collects traffic data information, count data from all of the jurisdictions, and puts together a regional traffic report every 2 years. So through 2022, we've calculated vehicle miles traveled. We do look year over year and look at statewide growth, and we'll be starting our 2024 traffic counts here this coming summer, or traffic report this coming summer. But our estimated growth there is about 2% per year from 2022 to 2023. And over the past 2 years, we've lowered that a little bit to about 1% per year. And that's pretty consistent. Nebraska Department of Transportation reports vehicle miles traveled by county each year. And so we've taken a look at that as well as reporting from Iowa Department of Transportation. We'll go to the next slide, please. And so this is where it really gets even trickier. So a couple things to note, and you'll probably see as well, is those traffic volumes do go down because this is a rate, the corresponding fatality rate does go up. So we do see that large spike in 2020 when we had the reduction in traffic volumes due to the COVID pandemic. And then just generally those traffic rates, traffic fatality rates are creeping back up over time. And some of that's mostly a function of those fatalities. So we do set, again, a fatality rate year over year. Those are calculated, and then we've taken that 5-year rolling average. You can again see that the general trend over time that over that period is a reduction. That red line is going down ever so slightly. And while we don't do anything fancy with the fatality rate, we just take and calculate what those numbers are, and we've done the same thing. We bring down that slope, acknowledging that it's really kind of taking a look at past data, and that number of fatalities and number of serious injuries are the two items that are driving our planning and our activities. Any questions on fatality rate? Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide then, please. All right, similarly with fatalities, the serious injury policy target we've established looks over that period up to 2040 and put in what was initially values to show that reduction over time and to fit to a curve. And you can see since 2022, those projected values and those targets that we've been setting. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I think I would note here that we did see in 2023 an increase in serious injuries, and that's not something we've seen in quite a long time. So that is something that we're concerned about, both just in the number of serious injuries and really it's just the smallest bit of chance that keeps a serious injury from becoming a fatality. So we are looking at this overall over the 5-year period. We are seeing a downward trend in the number of serious injuries and those targets, the projected value for 2024. And our eventual target are there. You will note, and this is usually we talk about serious injuries when I would talk this during our annual target updates or 6-month periodic review. This seemed to be the one we were less worried about, that the data would show differently in this case. And so, we'll hope that we don't see that rise staying constant over time with the crash data that we receive in 2024. All right, Lindsay, we'll go to the next slide, please. So again, with the serious injury rate, and not too much different from that fatality rate, we are just using those numbers found from our target setting at the policy level to just do the calculations and set that projection and that target. Okay, we'll go to the last performance measure that we do report, and that's non-motorist fatal and serious injuries. This category has the largest variability over time, and while we did see, and I would say it was uncharacteristic, we did see a fairly significant reduction in 2020 and not a huge spike in 2021, which many communities unfortunately did see. we're seeing the trend upward now over the past couple of years. So while the 5-year average is sloping down, again, this is something that we are focused on in the development of our comprehensive safety action plan, and we've not unfortunately seen the reduction in this area that we would like to see. So the non-motorist category doesn't have a corresponding regional volume that we can use for a rate. So this is also something that we're just measuring against total numbers, and we don't have the ability necessarily to express it as much as we would like to. So say we do have more people getting around walking, riding a bike, getting around in a scooter or some kind of mobility aid. We don't have a measure of that exposure to be able to talk about how we should prepare for it. And so that's why really looking at it and trying to find that data in other means are things that we're looking for in both individual projects and what we can measure as a region. Any questions on this measure? Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, that target setting for non-motorists, in this case, the polynomial curve that we set was quite a bit higher for the past couple of years. So as we get to the numbers, I think this one will be the most difficult target to meet over the coming years, because we're just going to have that natural drop in the target numbers below what we've been seeing as far as non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries the past couple of years. All right, 2 more slides and then we'll be done. Go to the next one. So this is how we traditionally report these measures. We'll package up these targets in our period performance, send it to, following your review and comments, to TTAC. And so after TTAC gets a chance to look at it, we'll send these up to the MAPA Board of Directors for approval. We'll provide this along with another set of performance measures, which are called PM2, which talks about pavement and bridge condition. Those will be going out to the Departments of Transportation and our state federal highway representatives for consideration. We don't, as an MPO, have any obligation to take action if we don't meet our targets. However, in this case, you can see we were able to meet all of our targets, and the better than baseline column just shows that we've been making progress year over year. So we've made improvements since we established that baseline. Okay, we'll go to the final slide. So these are what we would appreciate your comment upon, and just what we'll be setting forward to TTAC, that 2024 projected, as well as those 2025 numbers. So in this case, you will note that the one that has both the projected value and target values above that baseline, as I kind of mentioned earlier, are those non-motorized. And that's just a function of resetting to that curve, which we want to take forward towards 2040. And if there are not any other questions, I'd really like to give the opportunity for Tim to kind of talk through those next steps in our safety action planning.
And to those online, if you have questions or comments as well, feel free to unmute and let us know.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right? Is this loud enough? Cool. Yeah, so we last met with the safety committee just a month ago. And we talked about project prioritization. We sent out, I'll go over kind of what we did, but in this, for the remaining about hour, I hope, maybe a little less, and then we can have a conversation or conversation throughout. Please interrupt me. I'll look for comments throughout. but we are honing in on that draft action plan. We're actually gonna have a draft to map a staff for the review at the end of this month. And part of that draft is, I sent out an email yesterday with a PDF review link for the recommendations, which I'm gonna take you through just on a very high level. But mainly, we want your input on those, but I'll go over them, tell you how they came to be, go over the format of how the recommendations are laid out, and then moving forward as well. Which the next time we'll meet after this is the presentation of the final plan. And we can process is gonna look like to get there. So update on the Vision Zero toolbox and prioritized projects review. One, we had a lot of great comments come in. We had and this was a week ago, I checked, we had 120 plus comments and prioritized projects. We had a couple of people reach out to keep it open for a little bit longer as we start to address those comments. So we did that, so it's probably ticked up a bit more than that. I just want to say right on the outset that this is not the final time that people could comment on any of this. It definitely was these are the windows that we are sending out the safety committee and our TTAC, where we can do the most substantial edits to things. So the more you can edit or put in your comments now, the better, because as this forms into a draft plan, the less we can do substantive change to any kind of analysis or putting in brand new material. But we can still make changes, obviously, not obviously, but we can. And so then we had 50 comments on the Vision Zero toolbox. And then we also, I just want to say, we'll be responding to all comments and send responses to TTAC and Safety Committee. We had a question. One of the pillars of this process is transparency, and someone asked if we'll be able to see other people's comments, which you can in the PDF version. In the JS version, you weren't able to see what other people had commented, but we would just want to put that out to, hey, this is what a concern. Hey, this is what a concern was, and this is how we're proceeding forward. We also identified some of those comments that, hey, we need a one-on-one meeting with maybe a jurisdiction had quite a few comments on something and maybe a bit more understanding needs to come across, or we need to understand where they're coming from. So we'll be following up with those as well. But yeah, any questions on that process? Did that seem to work pretty well? Cool.
Andy Wicks, Helps Plus.
Sweet. Great. Thank you, Andy. So getting into the recommendations. I should have transitioned slide here, but now we're talking about the recommendations. So why these recommendations? Want to set it up, and you just saw charts just like this, so I don't really need to go too much into it. But we've established in this plan in our community that fatalities are unacceptable. We have a goal of 0 by 2040, and we need to be bold. I just want to set this, I'm saying this right at the beginning, because and I've already sent out the link to these recommendations, so you might have taken a look at them. I think some of them are good. A lot of them are going to be like, yes, let's do those. Some of them are going to probably push people, public works, planning, politicians to be, I don't know about that. And I want to hear your comments about that. How can we form these? But if we are serious about the goal of 0, we're trying to carve out a path to get there. We'll talk about logistics of that and what numbers are being put to these recommendations a little bit later, but that's how these were formed. So I just want people to keep that in mind when they think that's pretty bold, Tim, or think, well, this is a bold vision. So these recommendations were all, I just wanted to lead into how these came to be as well. Again, this plan is all about being data-driven and engagement influenced. Obviously, we have public engagement, and I'll get into what we've been doing through public engagement. We've had stakeholder engagement. We've had a bunch of focus group meetings. We've met with jurisdiction leaders, mayors. We've talked to city councils, and we'll be going to city councils with the memorandum of understanding on all this. So we're talking to the people that are the stakeholders in this whole process, and then it's data driven. So everything's built up on the high priority network that was created, the systemic data that we're going to get into, and as well as national best practice. So looking at those communities that have seen substantial change in their fatality and serious injury rates, and applying the best practice that we've seen across the country to those, and that's how these recommendations are coming about. I just have this visual here to kind of show where we're at. I think Jim's slides previously showed it a lot better for our region. But yeah, we have ways to go. Some Boys Town and McClellan are doing very well.
Quick question from Doug Egan online. He's saying, I assume Valley Waterloo means Highway 275.
I can confirm that later, but most likely. So what are those public engagement events? What were that?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was just going to maybe give a little bit more for Doug's question and make sure. So we're absolutely including Valley and Waterloo in our comprehensive safety action planning process. And so, you know, recognizing Highway 275 does provide a lot of the traffic volume that you see, that's not intended to be the only thing that we are looking at. So if that's what the question was.
I'll speak again. When we did our leadership commitment meetings with our Iowa communities, like McClellan and Crescent, their top concern, they have one highway coming through their town, and that's where all their traffic is on, and that's where any serious injury or fatality happened. So much of the same thing in very small communities is the highway that's probably going through your community. So our public engagement events, just an update on those. So we've been at 50 plus hours at community events. These are a list of a lot of them we have attended, and we are still going to some. This is also a list that was last updated in December. So these are, we have actually all of these filled out. Our last two are this month. We have 6 community presentations, and then 4 public open houses coming up. So I just want to iterate that we're talking to the public a lot and trying to get their feedback as much as possible with what their concerns are. We had our public engagement map that went out, and we had hundreds of responses to that, and that filtered its way in the high priority network. So again, that's making into these recommendations. Very useful for these recommendations were our focus group meetings that we had, and you're not seeing one of them. We still have one with schools that we're setting up. These focus group meetings got into very specific topics that help form a lot of these recommendations, especially the ones that are really hard to get at, the EMS and first responder recommendations, hospital ER trauma. It's the things as planners and engineers that we don't normally interact with, but they interact with us and the things that happen on our roadways. And so these meetings were very helpful, especially to understand, again, things that I don't normally interact with, like work zones, road maintenance and construction. We just take it for granted that these are getting done, but how can we make it more safely? How can we put in recommendations in here that's going to help get us to zero? And a special focus on work zones too, because we heard that again, because just in the last couple of years, we've seen an uptick in work zone severe crashes that have happened. So 21 one-on-one meetings. We've done some of these. We're also following up with a lot of these. These are going to be, a lot of them are going to be used once the draft plan comes out, so that we have that month and a half or so period to really make sure we're getting at exactly what this plan needs to say and listen to people. So if you feel like, hey, I want a one-on-one meeting with MAPPA and the consultant team, please reach out. If we can identify a time and to do that. And then 24 meetings with local jurisdictions. So we had the first half of those meetings happen already, where we basically introduced the plan when we wanted to hear about each local jurisdiction's priorities, what their concerns are, tell them what's going on with the plan. And then once we have a draft out and that they're able to review, we're going to go back and meet with them again, if not be present for when they're looking to adopt their memorandum of understanding that is signing them on to this plan. We have 17 jurisdictions as them all signing on, supporting this effort and the goals and recommendations.
So Tim, just as a side note, on the earlier slide that was showing some of our community engagement efforts, there are several other efforts that were kind of missing from that list. We haven't updated it yet with One Omaha's engagement effort that's been going on throughout the city. So we'll make sure to go in and get those lists updated for future.
Yep.
Thanks. And thanks, Vicki, also to pointing that out online.
Yep. Thank you. So I don't know how to hit the data-driven part. So we're hearing a ton from our community, our stakeholders, but also you'll see, and I'll go over our focus areas, but I want to go over how the data is used to form these recommendations as well. So here's an example on the right is mode share in the MAPA region. This is from census data from US Census Bureau. And if you break that pie chart out, you can see that there's a 0.3% in there. And this is how people are getting to work or how they're generally traveling. Census Bureau collects this every, I believe, 5 years. And so we're able to look at just the MAPA region, so Sarpy, Douglas County, as well as our Iowa communities. And then you break that out again. So that pie chart then breaks out between motorists, pedestrian, bicycle, and motorcyclists. And motorcyclists make up 0.1% of the total mode share. But you can see on the right, they make up about 16% of our fatal and serious injuries. And so basically what this translates to is that they're way overrepresented in our data. And so we're using data like this to make recommendations for motorcycle specific things, such as education. You're going to see in these recommendations. Oh, do we have a question?
Mine online?
The test.
The pre and post.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yep. And so, and then we have some legislative efforts in supporting legislation such as the motorcycle helmet law. And then I'll highlight on the bottom that we are also looking at things like design of our roadways, such as the intersection types, and seeing that signalized intersections are 10.5 times more likely to result in a KSI than a baseline intersection, right? And so if you compare that to a roundabout, you can multiply those two numbers together and see that a signal versus a roundabout is 30 times more likely to see a KSI occur. So we're using tools, and this will all be in the draft plan to help justify any recommendation that comes out of this plan. And I broke this down better. Okay. 160 times more likely to end up killed or seriously injured than any other mode of travel, than the other modes of travel, motorcyclists. So, any thoughts on that so far? Can you get
Kind of makes sense and come line up with our initial assumptions, I guess. Like, it doesn't seem out of place, I guess.
I just want to back up. I just wanted to slice out some data in here, but you'll see that our focus areas, we have 12 of these listed, 14 of these listed. And so we're breaking out data in every one of these categories that's helping us justify all these recommendations that are coming through. And so that you're going to see, and how this is broken down, which I'll get into in a second, is we do it on, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, guys. So organization of the recommendations. We have 7 different categories of recommendations. The first one, leadership and commitment. This is coming at the very top level. They're asking communities to commit to a 2040 goal. things like that, that are mainly policy driven. And then we break down into each of the safe systems where we look at post-crash care, safe roads, speeds, users, and vehicles. And then we actually have safety metrics that are year-to-year measures of progress. And the one that's just not included on this list, but is also got added, is data and accountability. So we cannot, a lot of times we cannot improve it if we don't have the data on it. So that's also been added as a category in here. So there's 8 sections to these recommendations, and this is how they're kind of organized. And again, these are recommendations for policy, education, new planning efforts, asking communities for prioritization, design standards, enforcement funding, and then legislation. And usually we're using the language of supporting legislation because we know it's at the state level that we need it, but we can make our voices heard. So each of the recommendations is
Tim?
organized. Oh, go ahead.
Tim, I'm sorry. Could you go back to the previous slide? And I just wanted to reinforce this a little bit more. You know, we recognize in a lot of instances, a lot of people are doing these, you know, discrete actions, whether it's planning, education, prioritization, and really one of the other things that we want to pull out from our comprehensive safety action plan is just a greater realization across stakeholders of what's already being done and finding a way that we can do these things such that they're positively supporting one another, so they're mutually supportive and reinforcing and more effective, and also helping identify maybe where those gaps are, that may be a gap given to funding or resourcing, and find a way to help improve those within our region.
Thanks, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so each one of these recommendations is organized into the recommendation itself, 1 to 2 sentences described in action for the applicable community. Description, justification of it, we add additional context to why this recommendation is being given. We want to give a relative cost figure. We borrowed the same system that Federal Highway uses for their known countermeasures list and what it takes to implement those. We give a timeline of short, long, ongoing, and upon plan adoption. And I'll just call out that we don't have any recommendation on here. Well, our long-term only goes to 5 years. That is because this plan is made to be reevaluated, you know, within 3 to 5 years. So in the sense of urgency that we need to get going on this very soon. Because even if these recommendations are not to end a fatality rate or all fatalities at blank things built. That's going to be tracking for a very long time, but it's getting the policies and educational efforts in place. It's a lot about putting all the structures in place so they can start chipping away at that overall fatality rate in the region, right? And then the applicable community is the jurisdiction that this recommendation applies to. And we'll see what that looks like, but a lot of times it's going to be population-based, or it might be just for counties or the state or for MAPA. So we have about 50 recommendations, and then about 20 safety metrics, which we'll go through those very quick. They're all on one page. And I need TTAC and safety committee's review. We really need your input. I know we just need to make sure these are tailored for the region correctly. So I'm going to start paging through them, but there are packets where you can look at all of these during our meeting. So if you want to put something out there for the whole group to discuss. Any first thoughts? So if you are reviewing, so I initially put in the email next Wednesday, and actually it needs to be next Friday. We're looking for substantial comments finished by next Friday from Safety Committee and TTAC, and then we can extend beyond that We want to start addressing those quickly. But the link that I sent out, and I can send out a reminder early next week or after this meeting, is just use that Adobe review link. A new window will appear when you log on. You'll insert your name after you left your first comment, and then you won't have to put in your name again. You can just keep commenting with that online tool. And then just so you know that you can see other people's comments. So, and you can even reply to them. If you see someone's already commented about something and you want to build on that or disagree with it, feel free.
And I dropped that Adobe review link into the chat for those of you who are online. And as Tim mentioned, we'll make sure that that gets redistributed to those in the room.
And what's not on here, we just appreciate you not sharing this link out. MAPPA, we're keeping it within the safety community and TTAC. We had one person in the previous round of commenting, asked to share it with somebody else, and that was perfectly fine. So just check with MAPPA staff before sending it out to somebody, just because this isn't public yet. Okay. Well, so the first I'm just going to briefly go over, I have one page dedicated to each section. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I just kind of wanted this to be an open conversation on what each section is supposed to get after, and then we can talk through it. You guys have comments on these? So the first section, leadership and commitment. So we're establishing a regional commit to a Vision Zero resolution by 2040, using some of the language of Vision Zero. This is a comprehensive safety action plan, not a Vision Zero action plan, but very tied together. And basically, in leadership and commitment recommendations are focused on planning efforts, funding, and implementation of safety measures. So commitment, we're asking every community through the MOU process to adopt a Vision Zero resolution and a commitment to 2040. Something that's obviously in the room is City of Omaha has one for 2045. So some communities, Omaha would maybe have through this plan would change theirs to 2040. We also give a recommendation to a safety pledge, creating something where the general public can come on and commit to efforts to foster a community of safety. Maybe just like some communities have safe driving pledges.
Do either state, Iowa, Nebraska have a Vision Zero target date? I don't recall, sorry.
Nebraska DOT does.
We have Iowa? Iowa, no. Okay.
Iowa doesn't at the moment.
Okay. Just check.
Is that something that's been talked at the state level? To like everything going on with the safe systems and SS4A, and as local communities keep pushing for resolutions towards zero? Is that something that state would want to adopt or be effective?
You don't have a defined end date.
Yeah.
And the reason I put the DOTs first right now, just getting a sense, I look through DOTs, MPOs, counties, and then local communities, right? So that's just how I categorize things. So that was my first question, states. Do we have any county reps? From the county, no. Local jurisdictions other than the city of Omaha? That's the only one I know that has Vision Zero.
I don't have a good contact here.
Oh, sorry. Any local communities would have an issue or concern with adopting a goal of zero fatal and serious injuries by 2040?
City of Lincoln is working on a Vision Zero plan. that will likely include that. Those are the two that I'm aware of right now. There are about a dozen, maybe it's up to a dozen and a half, communities across Nebraska that are working on comprehensive safety action plans that may develop a target date for zero, but I've not heard anything from any other municipalities.
City Valley says they have no issues.
You guys want to say something? No, okay.
I think I have a mic on here, so I can,
I'm just trying to get a.
No, I'm just getting a sense of, a gut sense, right? Like, this is the first time we're sharing our recommendations for this SS4A. And so I'm just getting a sense, getting a feel for the room.
yeah. So, I mean, you can't speak for your city leaders too, the city officials that are in here, because that's gonna come from a very, mayoral city council type level to commit to something like this. But then the pressure will be put on planners, engineers, and other people that work in municipalities. And then on people that are advocates in the room too. I mean, we gotta do educational efforts, other things like that. That's why we incorporated the safety pledge, that we didn't want to leave people outside of government, outside of an actionable thing to commit to. And then this kind of leads in the second part is this annual safety summit recommendation that we want to make something that keeps our whole community accountable. And I kind of want to hear from NDOT on, you guys have your safety conference every fall, late winter, early fall. And maybe this gets combined or because it's something different, but as an NPO, this is an NPO plan. It's keeping all of our communities accountable and that we're checking in with each other on the state of safety for the region. And basically, one of the things that I saw that is really powerful is at the World Day of Remembrance this last fall, that we had a lot of city leaders come together and we asked them to say, well, what are you doing for public safety? And they all said what they were doing. And we had I believe it was the city of Omaha, city of Lincoln, and some other officials from the region and the eastern part of the state. And it was powerful to see them commit and say, hey, what's been going on in their communities? Basically, let's check in with each other. What's been working? What hasn't? But expand it beyond the safety committee necessarily, people in this room, but we make it a broader audience and something that we're looking towards each year of acknowledging. So the next one is probably the most pertinent to this group, is establishing an ongoing Safe Streets for All committee. So is this the form of, how do we feel the safety committee should be utilized going forward after you have a plan put together? And does the committee what is the committee's objective? And what is the committee doing to keep the region accountable? The region accountable to the plan.
And kind of as Tim is going over these, we're asking the group for feedback. So if you have comments, if you think it's a good idea or not, like now's the time to also kind of speak up and have a bit of discussion about it as well. I have some thoughts.
Oh gosh. Oh boy. None at all. Because I had kind of been putting my thoughts together before I got here, because I know I've only been in here a couple of times and had a chance to kind of put a couple of comments, but not a lot. Now for One Omaha, I mean, really for us, I guess the pieces we're focused on are like the community, like education and awareness and engagement, but I feel like it feeds into some of the things on here. Like, I think they're good ideas, like the annual safety summit, however you choose to do it. We've been thinking around like traffic safety workshops, we have this infrastructure within the city already with like our neighborhood associations and things like that. And so trying to find a way to like empower these groups to give them like tools and knowledge to advocate for safer streets and things like that. But also I also serve on the Omaha Public Schools Board, and I'm also thinking about, you know, education. I think there's a lot of things that don't get taught to our young people that got taught to, at least I'll be 50 this year. So they talked a lot about traffic safety. I remember being a I forget what they're called now, the kids who go and help the kids walk across. Yeah, a crossing guard. I remember even having to have classes on that, and I was thinking about like a safe routes to school program or something like that. Um, and there's other thoughts too around advocacy, which I think should have its own sort of piece in there as we talk about policy and legislation and things like that, because there are groups that can kind of come to the table to help with that too. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking about right now, really about the education awareness and the additional engagement.
This is Julie at Bike Walk, Nebraska. I'll just second that advocacy is super important. Because what we've seen over the years, time and again, is that when it comes to these resolutions or these plans, whether it's Complete Streets or Vision Zero or Safe Streets for All or whatever it is, Climate Action Plan recently, what we hear is, you know, city council people saying, well, yeah, I agree, this is kind of a good idea. I don't really agree with every single thing that's in here, but I'm going to vote yes, but I'm going to, you know, review each thing one by one, and I might vote no on some specific programs or projects as they come through. So just because we get these resolutions or these commitments does not mean at all that things are going to be smooth sailing. It's still going to be project by project. We're going to need advocacy to keep pushing every single thing through.
I would suggest just the same way you have your Safe Streets for All committee. I'm working with some groups in different parts of the city that are putting together groups of people specifically for that reason, that they have them in their list and they can just call them when it's time to show up to support an initiative.
Is that what this group needs to be? Is something that gets reported out to and then goes to your own networks, your own cities, your own groups, your own.
To that specifically, because I was thinking about the safety committee, I think you need to have part of it possibly be a working committee. If you're talking about those 5 things that you want in there, that's a working committee.
Yeah.
And maybe you do it where that people go around and, because I don't quite know what Carlos was, I think I'm getting what Carlos was getting at, which is all these are great as long as you have all the municipalities and jurisdictions also on board with it. And so it could be something where people go around and, like you said, the sharing best practices and successes, that would need to be a working group, I'm assuming outside of MAPPA. So it's almost like you'd have to figure out what that is. Some people would be working group, maybe you'd have 2, I don't know. You don't want to get too organizational. And then on the safety pledges, I don't know that much. I don't know how effective safety pledges are. So just signing your name to something, that's great. To that point, right? You either need to educate those people, like Kamara was saying, or also then have a database. If you sign a pledge, then they're in your database and you can let them know about things and you can invite them to all events and maybe they understand that. Because I do think also there's a problem with siloing, not that none of us are trying to talk to each other, but that we might not even know who there is. So those are my comments.
I agree. I think the pledge is a good idea, but it has to be coupled with the right messaging, consistent messaging. Oh, sorry. I agree. The pledge is a good idea. It has to be coupled with other things, though. That messaging piece, I think we get lost on that sometimes, or just kind of take it for granted. It's really important, the communications piece and partnerships to help spread it and share it.
We agree because we're going to be 50 this year.
Okay. I'm just gonna keep moving along, but I can return to any subject, especially if you guys are reviewing that link that Lindsay put in the chat and something comes up. We can talk about it. So, the first safe system that we address is the post-crash care. And these recommendations, it's a hard one to get at because, again, some of the reasons I said before, as engineers and planners, we're not EMS, we're not doctors, we're not enforcement that's responding to the scene. And so we had some really great focus groups where we got those people in the room and we were able to talk through, well, what can we do as transportation professionals to help support you? What would be better? What would make your job easier? What would help you push down that mortality rate in your hospital or save people on your squad if you're an EMS service? So that's where these came from. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We had great conversations.
Away. Hot roadie.
Tom, are you off mic for a question?
Can I add something quick on the wayfinding?
Yeah.
If at least any place, we have all these new trails. Regarding enhanced wayfinding, and I don't know if it's on there or not, but with all the trails that we already have in the region and trails that are going to be coming, I think there has been some efforts from advocates trying to get enhanced wayfinding on our trail system. And so I think that should definitely be included in there, especially at least for places like Omaha, when they want to increase tourism and they have bike share, you're not always going to have people who know the area. So you need to, I would think that would be important to include in there.
Yeah, the enhanced wayfinding one, we had a conversation internally about, it does seem our sign's going to be here forever, we all have onboard, screens telling us where to go. But we heard from rural communities, sometimes it's just difficult to get to you have to give someone directions to get to a hospital. Try directing someone from, pretend a crash happened just outside of Waterloo. Tell them how to get to CHI, even though there's only 2 level 1 trauma centers in the region, which is Bergen Mercy and then UNMC. Giving someone directions to get to CHI, it's tough, but a lot of times these professionals know where to go. And that's kind of how this recommendation came along, though, is because a volunteer EMS service said it's like just hard to tell somebody where to go to get there. So just making sure that we're clearly stating that. Or maybe partnering with these volunteers, EMS service, to know what works best for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's also mile markers on roadways.
Yep, that too.
So highways, so that if there is an incident, then a member of the public can more clearly explain to EMS where you are. It's easier to say I'm on this road by mile marker 6 than about halfway between X and Y.
Yeah, I was coming at it from the trail user point of view.
Yeah. Cool. Let's crash care.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Trinity. The other thing that the EMS providers told us was when they use that wayfinding, they're probably different mapping systems, but the folks that we spoke to use Google Maps as a line underneath that routing function. And so if they don't know the road is closed, if they don't know, that it just adds time to the travel as they come up to a roadway and find out that there's a closure or there's some kind of slowdown that they could have otherwise chosen a different route if they had information completely applicable for trails, because we don't necessarily have a comprehensive trail network where we're showing that in a way that would tie into Google or some other kind of wayfinding. So, say if a crash happened at a trailhead somewhere, just being able to gain access the best way is important.
Another one that I I don't want to stick on this point too long, but the emergency pull-off areas, I was wondering if NDOT has seen any before after data with the ones that they've installed on I-80 just a couple of years ago.
We've not done a research study. I think they've been out there maybe a year. I think. So
Okay.
We are seeing utilization and we think they're working in that regard. We are seeing utilization. We think they're working in that regard. We haven't done a before after study. We typically would want about 3 years
3 years, yep.
as a minimum to really get some of the variants out. But we are seeing utilization and we think they are being successful.
I've seen them used as well, and when we were going through best practice, that came up as well, so. Yeah, just wanted that on all, if we can get that on all our high-speed facilities, that'd be great. Again, I'm only showing the first page of all these, but there's a ton in each one of these, but safer roads, this is one of our biggest sections. Because we're trying to save lives on the roads themselves, and a lot of our recommendations are tied to the physical characteristics, the design of them, so that we have a lot of recommendations around design standards. Yeah, so we are 3 sections, and each one you'll see that each safe system approach is broken down into either between 1 and 3 subsections. So Safer Roads is broken down into supplemental planning efforts, standards and guidance updates, and then policy and funding. I'm just showing the first page here, but as you page through any of those, if you have any thoughts on them. Something we're going to throw out there, we're really pushing Public Works around the region to update design guidance, to just incorporate a lot of, they all add up to be big things, but it's a lot of small things that we're asking for different design guidance changes. And then we also have acknowledged in the recommendations as well that we need to start coordinating and talking with state design guidance because our locals are tied to what the state allows. But yeah, any thoughts on that? Has there been, I don't know if Don or Jared, I'm sorry to pick at you guys all the time, but has there been,
Share what I know.
you'll share what you know, or share what you can, okay. With the state design standards that our locals have to comply to, especially with the Complete Streets initiative kind of going on at the same time. There's some things, I know they've allowed for more variants to happen to be applied for at times, but does there seem to be an ongoing conversation about allowing change in standards for safety improvements?
So Jared knows a bit more about Complete Streets, not necessarily part of that. There has been a lot of conversation, particularly at the national level, providing a lot more options and variability for not just at the state level for our guidance, but down to the local level, kind of context-based, alternative designs, practical design. There's a lot of ways of looking at it, giving a lot more flexibility and understanding what is appropriate for the context. And then also discussing how to understand the context better instead of some of the traditional formats of mobility and throughput and speed, and talking about what's going on with place and space and the community and how they want to share that space. So there's a lot of conversation going on nationally with that. And then we follow that structure in our design decisions in our manual. I'll expand on.
I will expand by saying I can't really say anything. No, that is to say, we are within the next month, we'll be really kicking off the policy development of Complete Streets. So to support everything Don just said, within that, we have to continue to work with our communities and figure out what those variables are, those variances, the flexibility that needs to be a part of these design standards. As we develop the Complete Streets policy, it will be integrated into our design manual. So it's more to come, I guess.
Yeah, Jared, through those efforts, are you guys looping in jurisdictions into the formation of those policies?
My understanding is that is the plan. During our research phase of Complete Streets, we gathered with a lot of jurisdictions, had advisory committee meetings, if you will.
Yeah.
I would assume we will do something similar in this policy development phase of the project.
So the next section was safer speeds. Obviously speeds being the key factor in what makes something a severe crash or a fatality. If we're all traveling at 5 miles per hour, we wouldn't have any fatalities. I'll put an asterisk on that. We have planning and policy recommendations again, as well as a couple other sections. And a lot of these come down to traffic calming. We have a 20-mile-per-hour residential speed limit. Sometimes these applicable, I'm looking at the applicable community here. Is this really, that might be a mistake or something that needs to be changed? Or at first thought it was just developing a draft policy on MAPPA's part, or is this something that should be, and this is what we want comments on too, is not just the recommendation themselves or the descriptions, is this the right applicable community? And some communities might look at this and like, hey, this shouldn't be applying to me, or this should be applying to me, especially if we put windows on walls on the recommendation of a certain population size. Yeah. Thoughts on any of these, or if you've been able to page through them? Yeah.
So in the microphone, we also have a comment online from Emerson saying, what might it mean if we focus on preserving lives as opposed to saving lives? I'm all for life-saving measures when needed, EMTs, ER doctors and nurses and other emergency responders, but in the day-to-day, we are about preserving lives without crashes, injuries, deaths. Going out into the community and returning home safely, practicing life-preserving behaviors can go a long way towards avoiding lessening the need for life-saving actions. Tom, do you want to expand on that at all, or? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I put that in there because, you know, and it may be me and language, but I just think that the focus on preserving lives, well, it's maybe not as attention getting as saving lives. That at the heart of what we're doing, to me, what we're doing is trying to get people out into the community and home safely each day. You know, to me, in the end, well, the beginning, the middle, the end, it's about you know, who's coming home to us or who are we coming home to. So anyway, that's where that comment is born out of.
My question came to the automated enforcement that is currently not legal in Nebraska. Would MAPPA be looking to say if this is something that as a region we're in supportive, that collectively we would go to lobby Lincoln for a change to that, or how would you approach this? Is just this is an Iowa objective and not a Nebraska objective?
I'll invite Jim to speak on that, but I'll do one clarifying point. Is Iowa allows automated enforcement. And so we have a couple of recommendations for them to essentially hone in on that a little bit. And then we kind of went back and forth a little bit on the lobbying language, and you'll see later on that, yeah, we have a recommendation to support legislation. I'll get into exact metrics on how impactful that is at the very end here. But Jim, if you want to speak more on MAPPA's position on lobbying and legislative things, or Lindsay.
Yeah, Tim, thanks for the question, Mark. So big picture, MAPPA can't lobby. However, MAPPA can absolutely be a part of the education and the advocacy process that identifies issues. So absolutely, we did hear from a a good number of communities that red light running in particular is an issue. And all of those communities acknowledge they don't have the enforcement capabilities to monitor it and would be interested in knowing really the efficacy of those tools and how manageable they can be. And so I think removing the political side of it and talking about the, productivity from something, a policy such as red light running or speeding cameras and how they could help us get to zero by 2040 is something that MAPPA could support in. And then, providing as needed kind of that education and that awareness piece to either decision makers or as part of the political process of rulemaking.
And I'll just say that I'm not sure how much I can share, but it sounds like there could possibly be an opportunity to advocate for some automated enforcement measures coming up in the Unicam this session. So stay tuned because I've heard some very encouraging news.
Thank you, Julie.
I know, I don't need, I'll try not to overmodulate in the mic here. I'll try to go very office calm. 20 mile an hour speed limit residential. There's probably some statutorial and city code, some things there you have to do potentially and how you would have to do that. Setting a speed limit one arbitrarily may be difficult from the enforcement side of things as well. For me, for a municipality, I would assume that to change a speed limit to 20 miles an hour, every single segment of roadway would have to go through city council for approval, things like that. So I wouldn't say if that's a goal, if that would be a short-term timeline. I would think that would take quite a while. And then I would guess that enforcement would be very difficult. It's just seeing the kind of speed studies I would see in a residential neighborhood. I think it would be difficult.
Yeah, we had conversations with enforcement and maybe some one-on-one meetings about that. I think obviously the thing that leads into that is that I would say close to 50, 60% of the people that drive just want to follow whatever speed limit is. But yeah, you're going to get a lot more eligible speeding tickets out there. So I like the context there where we're being knowledgeable of the waterfall effects from that. Please put that comment also in the online Adobe link too, but I put some notes down. Okay. The next section was safer users.
I'm just gonna quick aside.
Yeah.
There's like 4 other pages of
Yes.
speeds and things that are not up on the presentation.
I'm sorry, yeah.
So you guys have time to go through printouts that we've given you or the link that's been sent around and put your comments in. That would be really helpful. Because there's a lot more
Yes.
in there that we would like your feedback on than what we're just kind of presenting high level. Okay.
Yes.
And how are you answering the questions and comments? Like in the ones we've already done, you said you'd answer them all. Are you?
I'll put them. So we'll put for the PDF link, we're going to put them directly back into that link. And then we'll share out. We'll say, hey, we responded to everything. This is how we're proceeding. Same thing is going to go on with this. That's why probably any notes I get from this meeting, I'm just going to put your comment, make sure it gets commented in there so that we are responding to it. And then the Predators projects, that was like kind of a link that you commented on by clicking on something. We'll do the same thing. We'll probably download it into an Excel format that is going to show how, and then we'll share that out as an attachment to how we responded to them.
Super curious about that one.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm just sharing the first page because we want to strike a balance of we only have a limited amount of time. Please go to the link and use that to make your comments. Okay, the next section was safe users. This is all about the people that are traveling. How do we address safety there? But I'm glad this was the first page. There's a lot of legislative things that can and should be done. I'm going to call it out right away, is we need legislation on primary seatbelt enforcement. Like now, we are the 3rd worst in the country in seatbelt usage. whereas our neighbors across the river have a primary enforcement law and they're one of the highest compliance rates. There's a difference, you'll see there in this data, about 20% difference in compliance rates, with us about being 77% versus 96. So this is something that supports state legislation to get this done.
Is there a way that you can acknowledge, though, that groups have been doing that for several years?
Yes.
Because if you read this, it may look like,
We're new to the idea, like, hey, everybody, newsflash, we should, yeah,
I mean,
that's a good point.
someone maybe is kind of new to it, they're gonna know just how
Yeah.
we've been trying to, I mean, a lot of that has been, people have been lobbying for years, so.
Yeah.
Please put that in there, but, or just, what can you do that's different then? Like, you're basically saying you're gonna do the same damn thing that everyone else has been doing, so like, can we do something to make that? Oh, sorry. What can you do to make that more effective? Because otherwise you're just giving the same solution that has already not worked. So it would be good to put in some, I know that you keep up with like legislation across the nation because you've talked about advocacy, Tim. So maybe that doesn't come from us, maybe it does come from us, but we need actual specific, not just lobbying, but what are we missing so far that hasn't worked and how do we get it to work?
I mean, I would welcome, if anyone wanted to jump in there, I mean, I can. I think the biggest key here is we're gonna need to partner with our organizations that have already been doing this work. I mean, obviously, because a lot of jurisdictions, MAPPA included, can't lobby. But like, I think the biggest difference here is we're trying to essentially, the thing is like, this is no longer acceptable. We need to get to zero. Like, we're falling behind all of our peer countries, and peer cities even. I mean, whereas the Omaha region's having a banner year, I shouldn't say that. We're having one of the worst years on record for fatalities, whereas the entire country's moving downward. It's been 9 quarters in a row that the country has moved in a downward trend. And the Omaha region is moving upwards, from the preliminary data that we're seeing. So we need to put more and more, again, we're rallying everybody here of multidisciplinary, please reach out to your legislator kind of thing, but also that this plan is hoping to, like, we're trying to get 17 jurisdictions to sign on to the recommendations of this plan, and that we can take this to the legislature essentially and say, these 17 communities support doing this all the way up to the mayoral city council level. Please do this, or give us, if you don't want to do this as a state, allow us to do it as a city, something like that, right? Like, the number one job, sometimes we forget this, maybe people don't, but like, I forget it sometimes. The number one job of any government employee or any government in general is public safety. Sometimes we think it might be economic development or rules and laws, but they're all formed. Public safety is our number one priority. So, and let's just make it happen. Anyway.
I think the state senators, if you were to talk to them about why these things have failed with so many times, trying to get them passed, it's when you try to do this on the state level, we here in the metro area can definitely see the benefit, but many of the rural senators, this will not fly in their district, and they have constituents that feel very strongly that no one should tell them what to do. They need to be on their phone while they're in the field, while they're here, while they're there, whatever it is. So, it's like we can get we can get the Omaha senators to say this is great, but it's not going to be until we can convince the rural senators that this is needed that will it go through. That's just the reality of the politics, unfortunately.
Yep.
And I'll add, this is a reflection of what we've heard, right? So the policies and recommendations that we have up here, although not inclusive of everything, are a reflection of all the work the wonderful staff have done. They've gone out and had one-on-one focus group meetings. They've talked to enforcement, EMT, advocacy groups, political groups, planning, public works, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a reflection of many of the things that people have said
are a barrier for us to get to zero. So to a certain extent, this is us having a unified voice for the region, right? Having one single voice saying, all these groups really are behind these things.
Yep.
And these legislative changes are some of the ones that we've heard have been a barrier to traffic enforcement being able to do their job in terms of safety belt, which is one of the worst crash incidences that we have here in Nebraska as a state, if I remember the numbers correctly, and Don is going to correct me probably. But that is one of the things that they said. And so this is our reflection of that. And so for me, this is a reminder, it's not just us coming up with these cool ideas. It's a reflection of what we've heard throughout the region and all the hard work everyone's put into this. And really appreciate everyone taking their time and looking through this.
By the way, to
Oh, yeah, no.
but all I'm saying is we can then, as a working group, give a little bit more details as to how they can actually get that done. Because I think a lot of us know, like, you can say that the community can have their own red light running, but former Senator Ernie Chambers will bring a lawsuit against you. So it's like, those things do have to be done at the state level. Sometimes you can't give leeway. That's all I'm saying is we have the expertise to like make this a more robust document so that people can use it. And I didn't mean to come off aggressive to you. It's more towards senators, so.
No, I totally agree with you, Trilogy. And throwing it over to Don here, the mic. And then before you do is, I mean, one of the things is like the automated enforcement recommendations we felt bullish on, as well as putting in here, is because when we sat down with, I think we had close to 10 police officers from different jurisdictions in the room, they said, we do not have the staff. We are trying to do so much and we're not getting the quality applicants through the door to fill the positions fast enough. And when they can't do that, they can't traffic, and they like word for word, traffic safety is what we do in our free time. Because they have so many other public safety initiatives and things they have to meet. And so like, that's why we need it. And so I wouldn't dream of going up to the state legislature without the head of the police officers union standing by your side, right? So anyway, multidisciplinary approach that we need to take. Don, yeah.
One other thing I want to bring up is that's the big ticket item is primary. There's also a couple of sub pieces that could be worked on related to younger occupants in the vehicle that I've seen reports on certain pieces of legislation related to younger occupants in the back seat that could help improve safety for that group, but maybe a easier conversation than the big ticket primary seat law. So there are smaller gains that can be done that could be added.
And that's the same thing for automated enforcement, is getting in the door on work zones, school zones, or even defined as high priority network itself. You could get legislation defined as like a regional high priority network that can be implemented on. So we have
Tim, I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Tim.
I'm going to cut in too. Yeah, and that's not a simple thing to talk about either. So from the perspective of education, just what entails a work zone crash, everything from how does the law enforcement officer code it into the crash data? How is that evaluated by people that either plan for or operate within work zones? And then how do we report that either regionally or when we're looking at those focus reports? Because we did hear a lot of that feedback. Some of that focus group commentary was, hey, you're kind of showing us something, but we don't have enough information to really give you details. A lot of times if we talk about something anecdotally, it's not nearly as compelling as something that we have really refined data and results to tell that story.
Last thing, I'm going to skip to the safety metrics quick. But yeah, please don't put all your comments in this document. I want to empower the document more with a lot of the links to the best practice and where this is coming from, especially the last one there. Utah lowered their BAC limit, which is the federal guidance USDOT is pushing out to everybody, is that 0.05 BAC, and they saw a 20% reduction in fatality. It's crazy what people are able to do with some of these policy things. Safe vehicles, these are mainly around, a lot of these recommendations revolve around getting jurisdictions, and you can even do it sort of like a safety pledge, or you're contracting. If you contract with someone, you have to, your vehicle fleet needs to meet this standards by blank year, right? A lot of things to promote safer vehicles on our streets because we can't directly dictate it. That's at the federal level, but doing everything that we can. Data transparency and accountability, these recommendations all around those 3 points. And then lastly is these safety metrics. So I have a couple blanks here, but we're getting these updated, but these are where everything kind of ties together, and where Jim was showing the tracking of their goals overall by fatalities and serious injuries on your roadway. And Jim, he averages, MAPA averages is over 5 years. And basically, if you think about fatalities and serious injuries, crashes as a whole is a lagging indicator of what's going on. And it takes a while to see what's going on. So we wanted to put together basically, so the data influence where our high priority network came together, the high priority network then formed into something alongside it with the toolbox of countermeasures. You put those two things together, we get the prioritized projects, right? Those are on our highest injury roadways and highest risk roadways. And then you have these recommendations that formed out of a lot of public input, stakeholder groups that we've met with. And so what we did is we pulled out 20 things from the recommendations, and we tied them back to the goals of them. We tied them back to either the high priority network or the prioritized projects list, wherever we could. Some of them are not tied to something because it's just like, hey, have a plan that's at least less than 10 years old on complete streets. So that's not tied to the prioritized projects or the high priority network. And then we set a goal for that we thought is aggressive but doable, and this is where we want input. And then we gave a rate per year, basically what that looks like. So these are the things that we want the region to be tracking as a whole, and as well as to the jurisdiction level. Is basically what are we doing to get to this? And these are the things that we pulled out. Maybe there's things that we could add to it. There's things that we could take away. Hey, maybe that's not a good measure of safety. But these are the concrete things that we can be doing. Because it seems like a lot. 50 plus recommendations is like, wow, I don't even know how I'm making progress to that. So that's what this is to look at it year to year. What are you doing for these metrics directly? And then in 5 years, maybe you reached one of these. So we take it off and we replace it with something else. Or you just take it off. I don't know. So that is that, but please, again, use the link. We'll send out a reminder email and make sure that's at the top of everybody's mind for the next week and a half. So here's the timeline going forward is we have the first draft of the safety action plan at the end of this month with its distribution in early February. Memorandum of understanding to our communities in mid-February. We have our public open houses listed on the left there. Please come to those, show your support, tell your friends. And then final safety action plan coming in March. And then that's when we'll have our next and last safety committee as part of the planning this plan document come together. So, for one question, no, I can answer as much as people want to stay on for, but yeah. Awesome. Well, Lindsay, anything from online?
So we had a couple other comments online on our last topics of conversation here. So Julie Harris wants to point out that more law enforcement is definitely not the solution. Evan from Metro Transit is saying another idea to consider is ways to tell the story of those who have been lost, whether it's a prominent memorial, airpiece, or a digital archive. This can help appeal to people and make it more personal. He provided an example from North Dakota, so I'll kind of be documenting all these comments in the chat log here too. Julie Harris says, for our information we will see a vulnerable road user bill introduced soon at the legislature. Bike Walk Nebraska has been working with Senator Koff on this and she'll keep us updated. And then Tom Everson was sharing families for safe streets because it looks like they use a story map to kind of work on that memorial piece. So there's a link for that as well. And we'll make sure that gets out to the group. And that's it.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess if there's no final questions, comments, oh, Kimberly, you got one more thing? No, I was actually wanted to see that, right? Yeah, so we've got our open house dates on there. Those are all from 4 to 6, is that right? From 4 to 6 at those locations. If you guys are able to come out to any of those, we would love to have you. Those are gonna be open to the public, so we'll have a bunch of storyboards up. There'll be a brief presentation, sharing information, collecting some of that some more public input. And then otherwise, I guess we'll call it for today, and the slides and the recording of this meeting we'll put up on the website as soon as we can.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much to everyone online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.